I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this Word in Your Ear podcast, videocast, thing for which there is no name. Mark Ellen and I have been creating in this line since 2007. And if any of it has met with your approval, then please click to subscribe because it helps. Leave a comment because we like to hear from you, and maybe even consider becoming a Patreon supporter because then, well, you'll be one of us. Visit patreon.com/wordinyour-ear for details.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
Dave, we were talking last week about Live Aid, obviously, and one of the points we made with Boyd Hilton, who we were talking to, was that it was the death of the New Romantics. Because the New Romantics didn't work outdoors. You know, the sight of Midge Ure with his kind of maxi coat, you know, all of them with their big, thick, heavy kind of nocturnal club gear on, standing in broad daylight in the outdoors, didn't really work. And it struck me, I was looking at some clips of Oasis at Heaton Park just last night, and it's brilliant. There's Liam Gallagher on stage, still with his zip-up jacket, because without the zip-up jacket, he's not really Liam Gallagher, and he's there in whatever it is, 32 degrees, you know, I'm sure perspiring freely. Looked fantastic, but it wouldn't quite have worked if he'd gone on without that, you know. It wouldn't have been Oasis.
Yeah, we could go into I think we've gone down this tangent in the past of who are the rock stars who look good in shorts, because there are very few of them, actually. They very often got not very impressive legs at all, actually.
Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead, that's it, I think.
Used to be Dennis Wilson. Dennis Wilson, the Beach Boys. Fabulous figure, you know, looked like a Beach Boy. But no, you can't imagine.
George Michael, Andrew Ridgeley, that's your lot, I think.
Yes,
I don't get any more.
Yeah, this doesn't go a lot further than that.
But I have to say, Heaton Park, Dave, amazing. Don't you think that the idea that the Oasis comeback, I cannot think of a warmer and bigger and more ecstatic reception for any band reuniting. I mean, admittedly, nobody breaks up for that long. They've been split up for 16 years. I mean, apart from the Police, who got together after 23 years, and I think Guns N' Roses after about 20. But with the Police, I mean, lovely songs and all that, but they don't engender that level of loyalty and devotion, do they? Whereas this is amazing. I was watching a clip last night of a load of people who couldn't get tickets to Heaton Park, but they're up there on this kind of Henman Hill outside the boundary fence, and they can just see over the top of it, the top of the screens, and there's hundreds of people there watching with no tickets. They've all gathered together and are all singing the songs. It's just fantastic. I think it's rather thrilling, actually. The idea that they're so fondly welcomed back. It's such a major event. Although the levels of suffering are astonishing. Apart from the crippling, ruinous price you've had to pay already. Do you know about the front standing system?
Go on.
There's a front. You can buy a front standing ticket. And this is obviously not seated. This is Heaton Park, you know. And that gets you into the second...
Buy a standing ticket.
Yeah, buy a standing ticket. But this is front standing.
You get a football. You even sit down at football now.
Oh, no. So you're standing all day. Yeah, and, you know, that will get you into the second kind of enclave. But the front enclave has 9,500 people in it. You can get into if you queue up to get in there. And there have been people queuing for 10 hours to get into the front section. So you've already paid that amount of money. You're already going to be standing all day in this baking heat. And you've got to stand because nobody sits down. So, you know, there must be millions of people they can't even see, actually, because they just obscure, this stage is obscured by the people in front of them. But, you know, you've
it's funny, isn't it? It's
since
funny
6 o'clock in the morning to be able to actually be at the front.
It's funny, isn't it? If you contrast this, I think I showed you a picture not long ago of me and the good lady wife in the days when she was a good lady girlfriend.
Yeah.
At Wembley Stadium in 1975. So 50, count them, 50 big top 20 years ago. We gone to see Beach Boys and Elton John and so forth, and there we are sitting on the grass. Well, it was covered with some tarpaulin or whatever, but we're sitting there.
Yeah.
in temperatures that were pretty much similar to this weekend. Very, very hot. But nobody would have dreamt of all standing in those days. Can I just add, just chuck in a couple of more points on this? I can't speak for Oasis, don't know, haven't seen them, not a fan particularly. But you're quite right that their return has been, the occasion for an outpouring of joy, because it combines a number of things that people absolutely love. One is Oasis. The other is reunions. They love that. Mm-hmm. The other is going back and doing something that they wished they'd done at the time, but they didn't get round to it because they were too young, or they couldn't afford it, or they just weren't organized that way. And it also involves something which is enormously dear to the heart of just about all the population under the age of 55, and that is this: queuing. They love it. They love it. They love the idea that something's really hard to do, because everything else in life has been kind of re-engineered for convenience, except for these kind of odd events where suddenly people they're thrown into complete disarray by the fact that they can't immediately get a ticket. I've got no closer example to my home than my eldest daughter, who this weekend is with her husband up in Manchester. They don't live in Manchester. They live near me in North London. They've gone to see Oasis. He wants to see Oasis. I don't think she's terribly bothered myself.
And she's not going to see much anyway, because there's going to be thousands of people in front of her standing.
Yeah,
she's waving their bucket hats. And,
quite petite, and but it becomes a kind of obligation. It's that FOMO, manifests itself in all kinds of different ways. There's just a kind of compulsion to be there, you know what I mean? And so if it was the football, if it was the European Championship was taking place in London, or the World Cup or whatever, members of my family who have no interest in football would desperately want to go.
Yeah, because it's the challenge, isn't it? The more difficult it is, the more hard won the challenge, the more incentive there is to be there, and the more satisfaction you feel from actually getting in.
Have you ever noticed that place in? There's one in Covent Garden. I think there's one in what's the name of them? Southwark Market. What do you call it? Borough Market.
Yeah.
In Southwark. Have you ever seen the queues outside Monmouth Coffee?
Yes, I have.
On a weekend.
I've been in that queue.
You go into Covent Garden or anywhere else in London, Soho or Chapel Market or whatever. One thing you're not short of is coffee outlets. It's the only thing that's absolutely every other business property is a coffee outlet. Why is one of them sufficiently popular that people will queue for hours to get a cup of coffee? That's the clubbing generation at work.
It is.
That is, Mark.
It is.
That's
the premium.
That's the red rope generation. They've grown up with that. They think anything worth having is worth queuing for. And this is one of the big, in many respects, particularly here we speak on the 40th anniversary in Live Aid. In many respects, the kind of generation gap has gone away. But in one respect, it's never been more cavernous than it is now. And that is the attitude to queuing and wanting to go to places that are really attractive because they're really difficult.
Because they're really difficult. Hence the FOMO, fear of missing Oasis, isn't it? And the other brilliant thing Oasis have done is that they absolutely guarantee you the same show every night. They've played 3 times now, and they've played the same 23 songs in the same order.
Oh, really?
They've said virtually the same things, apart from some little comment about Pep Guardiola being in the audience, on Friday, I think it was. And, the fireworks go off at the same point, the lights show starts at the same point. Everything is exactly the same. There's no risk at all. You know precisely what you're going to get, which is really quite attractive, actually.
I suppose it probably is. If you've paid that much, you wouldn't like to think that you've gone on a night when they tried a few album tracks, would you? Really, that's not what you want at all.
You'd be mortified.
And what's the most What's your greatest experience, memory of seeing something that was the same every night? I'll tell you what mine was. In 1986, I went to Chicago with Genesis for Q, and I was there, saw them 3 nights on the trot in Chicago, and not a bar of music or not one element of the performance changed.
Didn't they say the same things too?
They said completely
possibly
the same
substituting
thing.
the word Chicago. No, it was all in Chicago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I kind of worked it out why later that they had. I remember making a big song and dance about this in the feature at the time, that they've got computers backstage, they're so organized, and they had, I think they owned or part owned a company called Very Lights, which used to do stage lighting, which was...
Oh, they were the big exciting thing. They spun round.
They spun round. They were, there was no operator on them, they were automatically, and they were programmed to do, certain moves at certain points in certain songs. And of course, that's just the advent of the world that we all live in nowadays, don't we? You go to a show, it's run off a hard drive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nobody is in a position to stop.
In fact, you can't change it because it's just too complicated. All these lighting cues, all these sound cues, all these prop cues are all keyed into it. And to suddenly spontaneously go, actually, we're going to play an old B-side from whatever, it's going to throw the whole thing into disarray.
Yeah,
Doesn't work.
So you're just keeping track on Oasis from over the fence. You're not tempted to go yourself.
I'm not tempted to go, but I am thoroughly enjoying the reaction. I think it's warm and it's wonderful.
Can I read you a bit from a newly published autobiography, which I know you've scanned and I've scanned as well.
We both got a copy yesterday, didn't we?
And I never thought I'd read a music biography that had a paragraph that began in this fashion. He goes, I got a job as a sales rep for Pantene, a hairdressing product manufacturer. They were still a small company in the UK at that point, and I was enthused by the quality of their goods. Plus, they gave me a brand new car, a Renault 4. I'd passed my driving test a year previously, courtesy of 4 attempts, and in the final analysis, a few Valium. Whose reminiscences are those?
Kylie Minogue.
Kylie Minogue, not Kylie Minogue. No. It's Kevin Rowland. Kevin Rowland was what I think it's the most enthralling thing I've ever read about Kevin Rowland. That he was once a sales rep for Pantene, and he had a Renault 4, and he rather liked the job. He found it really interesting. Absolutely brilliant. And
that's a rare moment in that book, though, because I had to scan through it yesterday. I'm going to sit down and read the whole thing, and I'm a bit gripped actually. But what a caution he was, wasn't he? That early bit. Have you read the bit about him he's just kind of addicted to the idea of felony, of arson, theft. Whenever he sees a bike, he thinks he's got to nick it. He nicks a scooter. Doesn't he? He nicks a bike one day.
It's like a Paul Whitehouse character, isn't he?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit fwy. I'm a little bit...
Yeah, he is. He's really white.
I'm a geezer.
And intensely lucky. There's one moment when he nicks a bike and he's running off with his bike. And there's 2 guys from a Caribbean family. They come running after him and they get hold of him. He's expected to be pulverised. And they kind of chat to him and get the bike back. And they bring him back home, so they want to have a word with him. And I think there's a football match on or a cricket match or something like that. He says, do you want to sit down and have a cup of tea and watch the game? So he kind of wins these people over. But he is, it's just horrendous, the kind of... just his obsession with breaking into things, burglary, theft, setting fire. He sets fire to a scout hut, doesn't he, next door to the police station, because he wants to be able to go. He wants to be able to imagine somebody ringing up the police station and saying there's a fire, whereas it is next door to you, and he's disappointed to see the building still standing the next day.
It's an intriguing book in the sense that, I mean, in one sense, it reminds me a little bit of the Patti Smith book, Just Kids, which on one level is kind of enthralling. And on another level, you feel like saying, didn't you find any of this funny at any stage? This life you were living, this succession of experiences. Did you ever think there might be a pattern to this? And that pattern might be me and my personality.
Yeah.
Because clearly what he's had all through his life, or what he writes about anyway, is a staggering ability to turn success into failure by just deliberate self-sabotage of absolutely everything. He's done that at every stage. Even his job at Pantene, which he really liked, and his Renault 4. He talks about that, not long after he'd started doing that job. He goes down to, I think he's in North London somewhere. Yeah, and trying to take advantage of some girlfriend or whatever, and gets chucked out. And starts the drive home from Colindale, which is in North London, up to Birmingham, I think. He says, I commenced the drive home, but it would be a couple of hours before I got there. I came to at 5 a.m, sitting in my now smashed up new car on a flower bed, literally on a roundabout in Queensbury, just outside Harrow. I managed to get the car off the roundabout and drove it home. It's just, you think, hang on. I mean, how did you do that exactly? And he does this at stages in his career all the way through. And it's a little bit. It has traces also of the kind of Ron Wood autobiography, which is you don't know whether to read it as comedy or tragedy.
Is it comedy or tragedy? 'Cause it could be either.
And you think, he's floundering around. He's had Gino's been a really big hit, and he looks around for somebody to manage his career, and he thinks, oh, I know, is the bloke who used to run the hairdressers that I used to work at.
Yeah.
And you feel like, reading the book, you feel like saying, no, come back. Don't do that at all. But he does this.
He's compelled to do the least wise things. At one point, he breaks into London Zoo and gives lighted cigarettes to monkeys. I mean, it's just absolutely appalling. But of course, he's now, as you have to be in the 21st century, the general tone of the whole thing is being consumed by shame and embarrassment and all the things he does. As you said, he could quite easily have gone back through the whole thing and said, this was a lark. You know what I mean? Danny Baker's memoirs are full of all sorts of terrible scrapes, but he plays them totally for comedy. And even when he's on the receiving end, even when he's shot in the thigh with an air gun, he still thinks it's hilariously funny that somebody shoots him as they pass by in a car.
That's true, isn't it? You can either play this, if you're Danny, you play it as comedy. If you're Kevin Rowland or Patti Smith or whatever, you play it as the serious business of life, and the kind of...
It's apology, isn't it? Bless me, Father.
But most of us, most regular human beings would go, well, here's a funny thing. Here's a turn up, And it's presented as just a series of incidents,
Yeah, because you could present those to you could be in a pub telling those stories, or you could be telling them to a therapist, and it's kind of the latter is the impression you get.
Well, listen, he has told them to a therapist.
Yeah.
Clearly many times, in which he's not alone at all. Because every rock star of any kind of level of celebrity over the age of 30 has had therapy. Almost without exception. They've either had it drink on drugs related, or marital breakdown, or
dealing with
pressure, or whatever.
Weirdness of the world they're forced to inhabit.
Absolutely. And so when they write the book, that's a kind of repetition of what they've already been doing in their life. No, it's kind of interesting. It certainly is interesting. And
true. You suspect it is true, don't you think?
Well, yes, except, and it's interesting that this should come up in the same week that the nation has been consumed by the story of the Salt Path, the memoir, hugely best-selling memoir.
Which you and I have been gripped by, haven't we? Should we recap very
on the
quickly?
story? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this was last weekend. Was a journalist called Chloe Hadjimateo in the Observer broke this story, and the Salt Path. For anyone listening who didn't know, it was published in 2018 and subsequently become a film actually with Gillian Anderson and Jason Isaacs. And the author was Raina Wynn, who talks about her and her husband Moth. And the two key things that happen are that she says they lost a huge sum of money after making a bad investment in a friend's business. And then the business goes bust and this guy comes back asking for the money back or whatever, and it leads to them losing their home. And also that Moth was diagnosed with a degenerative disease with a life expectancy around whatever it was, 6 years or something. And the Observer questioned both those things, didn't they? The first was that they claimed that actually she didn't, it wasn't a bad business investment where they were effectively lending someone some money, that she had embezzled money, allegedly, from her employer, and when required to pay this back, got into a tangle involving the house and lost the house through that. And also that the husband's illness perhaps wasn't quite as extreme as she was making out, because they then set out on a 630-mile walk of the coastal path of the south of England, and the story is about how that completely transforms their lives. And it was a huge, huge hit, wasn't it? A multi-million seller.
Absolutely.
And people bought into it because they really connected with the idea of the terrible misfortune they're in. In fact, in real life, one of the readers, who is a successful businessman, had a farm in Devon or Cornwall, I think it was, a cider farm, and let them rent this for nothing. In fact, paid them some money to keep the place going. So they had their beneficiaries who bought into the idea, and now the idea that it perhaps wasn't quite as true as they had suggested has rather shaken the foundations of the whole thing, hasn't it?
And questions have been asked of, the publisher, unsurprisingly, about, what attempts they'd made in the first place to verify, the basic details of the story when they came in there and sold it. And what people in publishing are all saying is, look, there's a limit to what you can do, really. The author indemnifies the publisher. The author has to sign. You have to, in your contract, you say, I guarantee that everything is to the best of my ability and best of my knowledge true. And that every effort has been made to verify. And I mean, I know from my point of view, writing non-fiction books, that you do get copy edit. They go through it pretty exhaustively, and they will come back to you and say, well, you said that was the third album, actually it was the second, or whatever, and and you correct accordingly.
Those are things that can be verified because they're out there. Whereas this is a personal detail, isn't it?
That's the problem. That's the problem. So realistically, what can a publisher do? You can't ring up a load of campsites in the in southwest England and say, did you have a strange couple staying there overnight, 8-10 years ago or whatever, who bunked off without paying, it's
which they do claim in the book that they do. They're not entirely likable in the book. No. I haven't read it, but a mate of mine who's staying has read it and said that they are, they're constantly, there's moments where they have meals in restaurants and run out without paying because they haven't got any money. But it does make you wonder, did they actually do the walk? It's really interesting because they've come back to counter all these allegations. And their quote was, they said, this is the true story of our journey. They said, it's not about every event or moment in our lives. It's about a capsule of time when our lives moved from a place of complete despair to a place of hope, which is the most nebulous thing you could possibly say. Also, our journey is great.
That is the authentic modern voice of the weasel speaking.
It is.
That's rather avoiding the issue.
But our journey is our truth, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Our truth is not necessarily the truth.
I'd tell you what has fascinated me about it is that if, and I think it's fair to say they've been liberal with with the truth, I think. And But if they decided that it was going to be a money-making project to write a memoir about something that had maybe happened, maybe not quite happened in the way that they would make it appear, it seems really odd to me that they then decided to pitch it as a book, because you're not going to make that much money. You get an advance, and most non-fiction books, if you want to know how hard it is, go into your local Waterstones and just go and stand amongst those tables near the front and look at those hundreds and hundreds of books that are there.
And to make it harder, the general consensus is now that non-fiction is not selling as well as it was. Why? Because of podcasts. So people who are interested in publishers, a lot of publishers have said this, people who are interested in non-fiction, in fact and stories and history or whatever, a lot of them going to podcasts where they would be reading books before. So it's even harder to make success out of that.
But it's to attempt to make a few £1,000 out of selling a non-fiction book is a long shot. But this one took off, and the more it took off, the more worried they must have been, surely, because you think the bigger a phenomenon this turns into, the more guaranteed we are that somebody is eventually going to come along, and it was the Observer eventually, it took a long time. Somebody's going to come along and point out that it's not entirely true.
Well, the fact that, as the Observer pointed out, that their names actually are not their real name, which is astonishing, because she's Raina Wynn and he's Moth Wynn, or Timothy Moth Wynn, and their real names are Sally and Timothy Walker. So that's interesting in itself, that they may have deliberately tried to make sure that people who knew them in real life didn't know this book was out before they'd start maybe raising questions about it. I don't know.
No, well, so it's a fascinating tale.
It is.
Particularly if is there going to be more of this kind of thing in the future as a means of kind of simulating, artistic products, intellectual products, becomes simpler and more within our grasp, thanks to AI and so forth, because the other thing is they haven't just written one book, have they? They've written three. And there's supposed to be another one coming later this year, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, which they've got. I think the publisher's gone a bit quiet about, actually, but that's right. But it really fascinates, because this whole thing of, truth, things that are true seem to have more and more value. But then again, we're living in a world where there's where the President of the United States is doing things that even his own supporters don't believe are true and don't care, do they?
Oh, no, not at all.
Not remotely.
No, it's a performance. Nobody cares at all. It's all who you're positioning yourself against and so forth. But of course, we've also seen in the last week or so the extraordinary phenomenon of what are they called? The
Velvet Sundown.
The Velvet Sundown.
Yeah.
Who are the kind of this sort of AI soft rock. I don't know how you describe it. A little bit of.
It's Neil Young, isn't it? It's West Coast.
It's the
Eagles.
It's and I was listening to it again this morning, and you can. It's the new elevator music, isn't it? It's music, for the 21st century.
Completely.
You could
stress reducing.
Yeah. I can't.
The album titles there, got two albums. One's called Floating on Echoes, and the other one's called Dust and Silence.
This is that's the most extraordinary thing. These are actual titles. Could not have been generated by a human being at all. Because somebody would eventually just give in to the urge to insert something vaguely odd or personal or whatever, whereas this is so generic. These are, here we go. These are the tracks. Dust on the wind. Drift beyond the flame. The wind still knows our name. End the pain. As the silence falls. Rebel shout. Smoke and silence, floating on echoes, where war remains and marching shadows.
Dust on the Wind. I was listening to that this morning too, and dust on the wind, boots on the ground, smoke in the sky, no peace found. Rivers run red, the drums roll slow. Tell me, brother, where do we go?
Oh, no.
It's an absolute kind of pap, isn't it? But somehow kind of ticking all the right boxes. There's a sort of sense that it might be supportive of the Native Americans. I don't know.
It's
that kind of frontier, kind of, dust and deserts. And it's the eagle. It's the essence of Eagles with the sound Neil Young, isn't it? Extraordinary.
Yeah. I'm looking at notes here. You sent me through some notes, things to talk about in the podcast. You've got some very exciting news to tell us about Kylie Minogue, haven't you? You've discovered your researchers.
Well, no, it's not exciting news because I don't know where it leads. I just thought it was so funny.
Mark, I'm sorry. Don't undersell it. This is really exciting.
It is exciting. Kylie Minogue is a year older. She's a year older than Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Say it again, Mark. Say it again.
Kylie Minogue is older than Jacob Rees-Mogg. I had to sit down and really sort of think about it, really. I just had to it was sort of head-swimming, experience that you needed some readjustment to deal with, Because she's someone who you always imagine is infinitely younger than she is. And he's someone who was, I don't know, in his late 40s when he was
when he was born. Yes.
When he was born. He was born with an enormous,
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fantastic.
I
think if anybody can do better than that, we'd like to hear from them. So and so in a new slot that will henceforth be called the Kylie Minogue slot, where you go, so and so is a year younger than so and so, or a year older than so and so. It's a very good one.
The other one I want is local landmarks, because I want people to send in any local landmarks near them, because there's one near me now. There's the Woodland Trust has done this thing where they're getting the nation to vote for the 10 trees, or the tree of the year from a short list of 10. And one of those is 500 yards from where I'm sitting now, which is it's known as the Beatles tree. It's an old cedar, 300-year-old cedar in Chiswick House grounds in West London. And if you watch the video of, I think it's Rain, where they're sitting in the branches of a tree, playing guitars. That was recorded in whatever it was, May 66, I think. They made Paperback Writer and Rain their first ever pop videos, pretty much. And so the idea that if that wins, of course, it'll be a massive tourist destination. And
you see, seriously, I've got a serious
It's already
point to make
cordoned
about,
off, actually.
Is it? Well, good.
Yeah.
Because I've always found it absolutely charming that we can come round to your house for lunch or whatever, and we go for a walk in Chiswick House grounds, and there's the trees, and there's the greenhouse or whatever, and you just think, I can just remember the Beatles, Paperback Writer, Rain, all that stuff, and I always think that's wonderful. That it kind of makes my heart swell, because you always think about the Beatles, and London particularly. You think they were here, they walked down that street, they turned that corner, they had their photograph taken there, and Chiswick House is a perfect case of that. And I was thinking about this and thinking there's no blue plaque or anything like that. And I think, actually, good.
Yeah,
good.
I know.
Because do you want everybody to know about it, really?
Because for years, people come for Sunday lunch. We've done it with you, actually, in your family. We go to the park and everyone would sit on the branch. I'd take a picture and I'd send them the picture later. They'd also send them the picture of the Beatles sitting in exactly the same place. And it never failed to have a really good reaction.
I love it.
That's amazing. It's the same tree with the same stuff in the background.
It looks the same, yes.
Yeah, it hasn't changed.
And do you really want a bunch of puzzled American tourists, queuing up outside Chiswick House grounds, Well, but we went to the test match the other day, didn't we? We met outside the Sherlock Holmes Museum in Baker Street, didn't we? Where there was a queue of American tourists, wasn't there? They were already there at 9:30 in the morning or whatever, going in to see what? What?
If you're going to the Dickens Museum in Doughty Street, then, a real person lived there and some of his real artifacts are available for you to peruse.
Absolutely.
We're talking here about everybody, apart from possibly Alan Partridge, realised that this was... Do you remember when Alan Partridge was interviewing somebody about the death of Sherlock Holmes? Did Moriarty act alone? This kind of stuff. He's not real, Alan. It's not real. It's made up. But anyway, why? I don't know.
I think the Beatles tree should remain a secret between you and me and the people listening to this podcast.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody else needs to know about it.
Please, nobody vote for it.
No, absolutely. I should go and vote for some Robin Hood's tree somewhere in in Sherwood Forest or whatever. I shall go on the other side of the argument.
But send us your local landmarks. It'd be very interesting.
Talking of local and local heroes, Ed Sheeran, you drew to my attention just how much he appears to have done in the kind of in the Ipswich area.
I know, he's fantastic. Well, Ipswich this weekend, he's playing the Ipswich Town Stadium, isn't he? I think he's playing 3 nights, I think. And just the level, again, of local affection for him is fantastic. You know, he's got this music foundation, which he's raised money for. He started doing paintings, which he's selling to support that. He's donated millions of pounds to East Anglia's children's hospices. You know, he's a thoroughly good bloke, I think.
No, absolutely.
And now to celebrate this, they are now painting the town pink, you know, to tie him with these 3 gigs. I just thought that's great. I mean, he's fabulously kind of polar opposite in some ways in his attitude to the very self-interested Gallagher brothers. But each of these big occasions is worthy of our applause anyway.
No, definitely. What have we been doing this week, Mark? We spoke to Peter Hook, didn't we?
Peter Hook was terrific.
Peter Hook was fantastic.
Incredibly funny. Really good stories about about life as a DJ. You know, there's a lovely moment when he plays 2 songs. He's playing at some Fashion Week event in London, and he plays 2 songs, and the club owner texts him and says, "Are you going to play this shit all night? You might as well get your stuff and go." He's brilliant. No, he's terribly funny. Was it John Otway we talked to, who was very good value?
He was an inspiration, John Otway. What I can't remember what birthday he's reaching next year, but isn't he going to do a world tour, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's, how old would he be now? I think he's about 73, I think. But the astonishing statistic is he's played 5,280 gigs or whatever, and thinks he will play his 6,000th gig when he's 80. And apart from B.B. King, and he thinks Cheap Trick, nobody else has ever played that many shows in their lifetime. Which is interesting, isn't it?
It is extraordinary.
The Stones have only played 2,000. Dylan's only played 4,500.
Yes.
A paltry 4,500.
What a work-shy fop
I know.
Bob Dylan is. Here, take an example from John Otway's. We've also spoke to Neil Hannon, didn't we?
Yeah, that's coming out.
Coming out in a few weeks' time. He's got an album coming out in a few weeks' time. But if you haven't already done so, and you'd like to know how to be a Patreon supporter, how you can support this enormously important work that we're still doing after all these years, you go to patreon.com/wordinyour-ear and find out how you could be involved. And if you are involved, you might well have the opportunity to join us on the occasion of your birthday and throw a log on the Word in Your Ear fire, as was the case this week with Patrick Butler.
And now it's time for Word in Your Ear's birthday guest of the week.
Our special Patreon guest on the occasion of his birthday is Patrick Butler. How you doing, Patrick? Where are you?
I'm just south of Boston, Massachusetts.
Of course. Boston with the W after the B. That's perfect. That's perfect pronunciation. I'm sorry, I've remarked upon this in the past. And it's customary on these occasions for our guests to throw a little log on the Word in Your Ear fire in terms of conversational topic. Sure. And it's very exciting, actually, because Patrick has got an answer here to the perennial question, what is the greatest musical city? And, out there, you may think you've got your own theory, but you've been wrong. No, because all the time, Patrick's been sitting there with the answer.
So I'm just the argument.
I'm going to throw in a few kind of few obvious ones first, because I feel it now seems the time seen he's sadly had to call off some shows because of ill health. Jeff Lynne, reminds us once again that Birmingham, has a great claim to be a great musical city. Not a huge amount of bands, but hugely influential bands. I know Black Sabbath are not strictly Birmingham because then you get into questions about Wolverhampton and I don't know, all that stuff.
Okay.
Maybe, you got the Move and you got the Electric Light Orchestra and all that kind of stuff. You've obviously, is Liverpool a great musical city, Mark? Obviously.
No, you see, I would say it probably had the most impact. But then you could argue, I suppose, that New Orleans is a possibility.
Yeah, you would.
Orleans, you've sort of got Robert Johnson, you've sort of got the Son House, you've sort of got Charlie Patton, haven't you? Fred McDowell.
Well, I don't know.
Louis Armstrong, and you've got jazz. You've got sort of jazz and blues. So,
well, Louis Armstrong didn't do anything until he went to Chicago, did he? I think
no, but that's where he came from. So
that
was what he grew up with, wasn't it?
And there's a huge amount of rock and roll came out of New Orleans in the 50s and 60s. And obviously Memphis, Tennessee, in the 50s and in the 60s and the 70s. New
York.
And beyond. Those kind of capital cities, they're kind of a bit obvious, aren't they? Because everybody goes there in the end, don't they? It's like London, New York, Los Angeles or whatever. That's where people go to either make their fortune or spend their fortune, don't they?
But Patrick, we want the answer.
Yeah, what's the answer, Patrick?
So
we're bated breath. Everybody out there has got a pencil, poised over a piece of paper.
So I guess no one can get anything past Mark and David because the answer is, of course, New Orleans. It is the greatest. It is absolutely the greatest musical city. If you haven't been lately, I was just there 6 months ago, and literally everywhere you go. Let's put it this way. I'll tell you a story. I was walking down not Bourbon Street, Calumet, which is one of the side streets, and I heard some phenomenal blues guitar playing about 12:30 in the afternoon. Right? I mean, they get going early in New Orleans, right? Yeah, and. Yeah. It was the most incredible guitar playing, the little drummer, and this older African-American guy just playing this fantastic blues guitar. So we walked in, my wife and I had a drink, watched him play. He finishes. He's like, "Thank you very much." Takes the guitar, puts it away, goes over and starts washing the dishes.
Yeah, that's quite right. There ought to be more of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was like the next guy got up and was playing jazz piano, and I think he was the cook. It was just everywhere you went, and that was just kind of the jazz and blues, and then you could go hear great country music and hip hop.
You also hear this strange. It's funny you should say this because only quite recently I found myself watching a load of clips on YouTube, and of course YouTube is a whole new conduit for people like this, because there's a camera pointed at everything, and so you get these ensembles playing on the street in the French Quarter, and there'll be two singers, and there might be somebody with a washboard, and there's two guitar players, and there's a bass and a trombone, and they're playing this kind of extraordinary synthesis of really old New Orleans music and quite new New Orleans music, and it's kind of endless. They can go from one tune to another, and I found that utterly charming. It struck me there was more rich music coming out of there now than probably would have been the case 20 years ago. Well, I don't know.
Is the Hot 8 jazz band from New Orleans? I think they are.
I might well be.
Yeah, Hot 8 play all sorts of stuff, blues and all sorts of contemporary stuff, but play them with jazz instruments, and often play them marching in the street. They're fantastic.
Now, do you know, while we're talking about New Orleans, do you know, because I'm in a position to give you a piece of information, just you've given me a piece of information.
Sure.
It's only fair. I should tell you, do you know what the name of the greatest long-playing record ever made in New Orleans is? Do you know? Have you got
When you say long playing, I'm assuming just a great album title or just...
It's a great long-playing record, was all made in New Orleans. It is Lee Dorsey's Yes We Can.
Yes, we can.
Produced by Alan Toussaint in 1971 or whatever. And it's got, songs that were Pointer Sisters that hit with Yes We Can. Mm-hmm. Sneaking Sally Through the Alley, Robert Palmer did it. And it's the band of the Meters, for crying out loud. Come on.
And that was just probably a Tuesday afternoon for them.
It probably was. It probably was. And you listen to it, you think, this sound could not have come out of anywhere else in the world. It simply couldn't do it.
I love that city. I saw Alan Toussaint for free in Brooklyn, New York, about 15 years ago. And it was him and a piano. And I got to tell you, there was probably 5,000 people in the crowd there in Prospect Park, Brooklyn. And you could hear a pin drop. He was so incredible. And that really turned me on to wanted to go down there and see the music.
Right.
And it's just such an incredible city. And if you haven't been lately, you kind of can't believe that it's all there, you know? And,
no, I haven't been for a long time. And
Preservation Hall still going?
Yes, it is.
Yep. I can remember going to that.
Fantastic
I was
place.
about 19 and been knocked out. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Yep.
Fabulous, creaky old band playing. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, when I went, as applies to so many cities, you go very often when you're relatively young. And you don't know much about it at all, really.
Right.
It's only later, 30 years later, you've read about 10 books about it. You think, oh, God, that's what Congo Square was all about.
You think, I wish I'd noticed that. I wish I'd known that at the time.
Flood of 1928 or all that kind of stuff, you know.
The levy.
You shouldn't be allowed to go until you're older.
That's true.
Should have a licensing system. Only allow people over the age of 60. So, well, you know, I'm glad to see that amongst everything else, we've been able to, you know, add to the sum of human knowledge on this occasion.
As always.
Because there were poor benighted souls out there going, San Francisco or
that's right.
Seattle,
Nashville.
No.
The correct answer, thanks to Patrick Bottle for telling us this, is New Orleans. and thanks for telling us that on the occasion of your birthday. And please come back next year to lighten our darkness once again.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.